Hello, everyone. It's absolutely fantastic to be here this morning. A big thank you to Stephanie for this opportunity to speak about stories and who gets to tell them. And what a fantastic place to do it. There's nowhere quite like Nottingham, but then of course I would say that. As well as being internationally renowned for the legend of Robin Hood, Nottingham is a very young and diverse city with a history of rebellion, of political defiance, of free expression, of radical, life-changing literature, and of social justice. And for me, that is what diversity is about: inclusion and social justice. I'm reminded of this Junot Diaz quote about monsters having no reflection. If you want to turn a human being into a monster, deny them at the cultural level any reflection of themselves. And it's true. I believe that our aspirations are initially built in the representation we see in books, films, television, and on the stage when we are young. Not just people of colour like me, but of everyone. If we have positive images of disabled people, of working class people, of LGBT and BME people in our art and in our stories, then we don't see ourselves as sidekicks or non-existent. We stand equally. I'm a passionate advocate for greater inclusion and equality and have taken part in many discussions about the lack of representation, particularly in my area of work, which is literature and publishing. But I believe we have now reached a turning point that is making me feel hopeful for the future. So over the next 10 or so minutes, I'm going to look back at my life and trajectory and take you on a bookish journey of sorts and share a number of stories around this topic that is bringing about meaningful change. Now, I grew up not very far from Nottingham in a town called Derby. In my house, there were no books to read. I was working class, daughter of immigrant parents on disability benefits. My school meals were paid for by the state and I received an allowance for my school uniform. People like me weren't even expected to go to university, let alone work in the arts. I left school at 16 with few qualifications. My marriage had been arranged at the age of 19 and I had my first child at 21. When I finally did go to university, I was working in Sandwell Libraries, an area very similar to the one that I grew up in, an area with high levels of social deprivation, low aspiration, and with very few cultural opportunities. But by then, I had something to say. I fell accidentally and passionately in love with libraries. Libraries cultivated my deep relationship with reading and my belief in the importance of books and the power of books to shape culture. In the fiction section, there were thousands and thousands of beautiful books that I would happily borrow. And these are just some of the books that have made a profound impact on my reading life. But what I didn't see on those shelves were many books that spoke about my life, about my experiences, and characters who came from an immigrant background, or a working class background, or a subclass background like my own. I have transcended out of my class of origin because of libraries. They showed me the power of great writing and the power great writing gave me. And it was through that alchemic act of reading that I was able to forge a career first in libraries and then eventually in literature and book publishing. And as I entered the space of publishing, I had no real-world connections. I'd never heard of anyone who worked in literature or who had published a book. And I was reminded that I am not like them. I am different. I come from a very different background. And as I looked around me, I began to notice two things. Where are all the writers of colour? And where are the books by working-class writers? Now, that was 10 years ago. This isn't a new conversation. So what's changed? Well, there does seem to be a much greater buzz around inclusive stories. In the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen not only a raft of new initiatives, but also unusual suspects who are driving forward change from outside mainstream spaces. They combine an inclusive outlook with alternative funding streams and social media technology that has been used to galvanize people and spread the word. Let me just take you through a few shining examples. We have established independent publishers such as One World, who have long been weaving inclusivity into their commissioning, into their programming, fantastically making it a core part of their business. Two writers published by One World, Marlon James and Paul Beattie, both black and were very little known in Britain. That was until they won the Man Booker Prize successively in 2015 and 2016. I really admire One World for bringing stories into the market from around the world that might not otherwise be seen. And then we have those new independent publishers who are doing things differently. Heather McDade and Laura Jones, two young publishers, set up 404 Inc. Press and published this debut collection last year. The title is taken from President Trump after he called Hillary Clinton a nasty woman. The day after Trump was elected, the idea emerged. By International Women's Day, only 4 months later, it was published following a hugely successful Kickstarter campaign and with support from Margaret Atwood. The 20 writers featured in this collection may be young and they may be unknown, but none of the writers hold back, tackling topics as heavy and as complex as contraception, sexual assault, weight, class, and race. I can't think of anything more important right now than women telling their truths. In another crowdfunding publishing success story, the writer and campaigner Nikesh Shukla put together this anthology of essays about race and immigration in the UK. He wanted to use it as a way of pooling some of the best BME writers in the country because he felt these voices were not being heard. He worked with Unbound. Now, Unbound is an unusual publisher in that it uses crowdfunding to pay for all the initial costs to get a book written, edited, printed, and distributed to bookshops and libraries. Nikesh crowdfunded this book in just under 72 hours before a single word of it was even written. It has since been showcased a host of new talent. It sold over 60,000 copies and is now set to be published in America. But one of the most inspiring things about The Good Immigrant has been the reaction of young people who talk about how the collection spoke to their reality. We have Kit Duvall, who has campaigned energetically against class prejudice in publishing. She's a writer from Birmingham whose debut novel, My Name is Leon, about two siblings in foster care, sold to Penguin Books and went on to become an international bestseller. After securing the book deal, Kit used some of her advance money to set up a creative writing scholarship, which gives an applicant from a low-income background a fully funded place on a creative writing master's degree course at Birkbeck University. She's also contributed to a collection of new essays called Know Your Place by working-class writers and published by a small experimental publisher, Dead Ink Books, based in Liverpool. Kit has now formed a collective of working-class writers who are working together with the regional writing development agencies, including Spread the Word and Writing East Midlands, to crowdfund and publish Common People, a collection of essays, poems, and pieces of personal memoir, bringing together 16 well-known writers from working-class backgrounds with an equal number of brand new, as yet unpublished writers from all over the UK. I think what is striking among these writers is that they weren't championed by the establishment, but they found a way to publication through using crowdfunding platforms, building online communities, and by bringing readers closer to writers. It was not only about what they published, but how, and that how was generally with a very loud voice, and by empowering audiences to become participants, to become creators and activists, where the relationship audiences have with the content is entirely different. They feel like they own the story, that they can interact with it, that they have power over its publication and its reach. A lot of us haven't quite caught up with that yet. We haven't done anything about that, and I think that's because giving away power isn't an easy thing to do. In a sign that mainstream publishers may be starting to address the imbalance, it was rather heartening to see LGBT and BME authors profiled in yesterday's Observer, including Michael Donker, who cites the crucial role of Writers' Centre Norwich and their Escalator mentoring programme, which smoothed his path to publication for his first novel, Hold, which is published by Fourth Estate this year. Now, you might remember in the mid-1990s, there was this huge boom in gay and lesbian publishing because it was found to be a market with supposedly a lot of disposable income. And what happened was the category became really overpublished and a lot of books lost money. And then after a short while, the pendulum kind of swung the other way and it went back to being more niche. And the point about this serves as an example of how publishing and the arts needs to see this push towards more diverse writers and more inclusive stories, not as a current trend, but a new reality, one which carries with it the challenge to be at the forefront of this push. And this is demonstrated brilliantly by the recent television adaptation of Satnam Sanghera's memoir, The Boy with the Top Knot, which is about growing up Sikh in Britain and features both racial and mental health issues. It was a real TV watershed moment, and BBC Two's highest rating drama of 2017 in that 9 p.m. slot, which I think proves that many stories like this one, from a cultural perspective, are universal and not niche. Now, closer to home, Nottingham has always had a great tradition of working-class writing. Writers such as D.H. Lawrence, Alan Sillitoe, Shane Meadows have shaped literature and film, telling the stories of ordinary people in the real world. We are incredibly proud to be supporting and nurturing the next wave of local voices. Our fantastic shortlist for Nottingham's Young Poet Laureate reflect a diverse spectrum in voices and poetic styles, and together they represent the incredible breadth, energy and diversity of the local poetry scene. Local writer Beth Steele's Wonderland is a fresh and provocative new drama exploring how the 1980s miners' dispute changed Britain. The play premiered in 2014 in London to great acclaim, and so we're absolutely chuffed that its regional premiere will be here at the Playhouse. And in another great highlight for 2018 is a new play called Shabeen by award-winning local writer Mafaro Makubika. Mafaro was born in Zimbabwe, came to England when he was 16, and fell in love with the theatre after seeing his first play at the age of 18. Shabeen is Mafaro's first time writing for the main stage, and that is one of Nottingham Playhouse's core responsibilities, helping writers, particularly local writers, that can make that step from a smaller, intimate studio space to a big auditorium. So I think all of this fantastic energy and imagination galvanized by a brilliant blend of unusual suspects and local NPOs committed to new talent development is having a rippling effect. But there's still a long way to go to have more diverse writers across different genres and different disciplines, not just the literary or the academic, and crucially, to embed it into core business. Now, I'm going to finish with a quote from Kazuo Ishiguro's Nobel Prize lecture. In a time of dangerously increasing division, we must listen. Good writing and good reading will break down barriers. We may even find a new idea, a great humane vision around which to rally. We are living in a time when what it means to be other is shifting dramatically, at a time of increasing tension, fragmentation, and uncertainty across Europe, when young people must wonder what the future holds. We need to publish, stage, broadcast stories as diverse as Britain truly is, to project the stories of women, to stage stories of and by people of colour, to tell stories of all identities, of love of all kinds, of the challenging moments in this country's battles for progress. Stories that help to build bridges and foster empathy, understanding, and tolerance as we look ahead to a future that could challenge the openness that many of us hold dear. And yes, we do need to listen harder. We need to create partnerships outside of our comfort zone to be more bold and more courageous by inviting those voices we have ignored or feel abandoned and left behind. And I think today offers us a chance to look within, because if we want to look at the stories we are telling, then I think it's important to self-reflect, to check in on ourselves and see whether we're representing the world and the local, because there has never been a greater need for local voices to be heard and understood. We need the voices of our communities and artists who can show us the way forward, give us new stories, new ideas, new ways of thinking, and crucially uniting our communities between those who want to be part of the international community and those who feel left behind. So let's think about the choices we make. Let's work harder to spot what communities need from us, and let's provide the glue to creating community cohesion, because that is what we are all brilliant at. Thank you for listening, and have a fantastic day.